Welcome to Daddy and Pal's Tom Hayes, aka Positive Lad.
How are you doing?
Good, yeah. It's been a bit of a crazy morning because we had fancy dress day at school.
Of
And
course.
my son decided at the last moment he didn't want to wear the outfit we provided him with. So we basically had a huge tantrum and he ended up going to school in a big WWE jumper. So, Tom, for the sake of people who might not know about you already, tell us a little bit about you and your home life and what you're up to.
So my name's Tom. A lot of people know me online as PositiveLad, and I am a HIV activist and campaigner. So what that means, I suppose, is I work with HIV charities and medical bodies to advocate on behalf of people living with HIV. So perhaps to improve testing, to raise awareness of things like U equals U, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, to talk about improving services, reducing stigma, that sort of stuff.
Obviously. Operationally, do you find that you're doing sort of public speaking and going on the radio, media appearances, stuff like that quite a lot?
I mean, it's obviously been a bit quieter during the pandemic years, but yeah, usually I'm rushing around all over Europe and the world, meeting other people living with HIV, talking to governments, to health bodies, going on TV and radio, a bit like yourself, doing magazine interviews, or to just raise awareness of HIV and sexual health and get people, testing and looking after themselves.
Oh, it's just fantastic. I love it. So just remind us all before we get started, where can everyone find you? So you are Positive Lad, all one word, on all the social media channels.
Yep, that's correct.
You've got a website.
Positive Lad everywhere.
You've got a website.
Yeah, website is www.beyondpositive.org, which is kind of a news and magazine site for people living with or working in HIV. So we've got stories from people living with HIV, and we've got news around treatment and testing.
So let's chat about Positive Lad, right? So how long have you been Positive Lad on social media and a campaigner in the way that you are now?
So I was diagnosed in August of 2011, so 10 years this year. Yeah. It was a routine HIV test. I wasn't expecting anything to come of it. And when I got the news, the diagnosis, I realized I knew absolutely nothing about HIV or sexual health generally. I went to a good Church of England school in rural England, where sex education was minimal at best. And then, so when I found myself at 25 living in London with a HIV diagnosis, I realized I knew nothing about sexual health and HIV. So that's when I knew I wanted to start campaigning to raise awareness and help people educate themselves and improve treatment literacy. So, hopefully less people find themselves in a position I was.
When I went to school in the 90s, and I think you're probably a bit younger than me, but I went to school during Section 28, right? So I was born in 1980. And there was never, ever, I mean, there wasn't any sex education anyway, really, that was any use to anyone. But it was all just about reproduction and biology. So basically, I left school at 16 without a clue, even really what being gay meant, because it wasn't even something that was mentioned, let alone HIV and related kind of sexual health and things that really kids and particularly like sexually active older teenagers should be aware of, really. And
so you were only 5 years before me, and when I came through, it was no better. Our sex education lesson was one 1 hour lesson, and it was a VHS. And it was a cartoon of two rabbits having sex, and then a close-up of a woman giving birth. And that was it. That was our entire, there was no talk about STIs, HIV, contraception even, not even condoms or a contraceptive pill. Obviously, there was no talk about HIV or any of the advancements we got now. It was still Section 28 when I was coming through school. I actually got in trouble. So I've always been an activist. I got in trouble for collecting signatures for Stonewall's petition to repeal Section 28. And the school headmaster tried to take away my petitions because by letting me collect signatures was contravening Section 28. And there was a whole hoo-ha of my parents in the school, but yeah.
So what about, so thinking about that now, so I've got an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old that our 12-year-old's already in secondary school, and the 11-year-old's very kind of inquisitive about sex and biology and how the birds and the bees work. But in your experience as an activist, are you finding that kids are learning more at school, secondary school nowadays than they were when we were kids? Or is it still pretty much like you've got to fend for yourself and do your own research?
So it varies wildly. If you're in a fairly liberal area, your local authority may have asked a school to give a more full sexual health and relationships curriculum. Whereas if you go to the complete opposite scale, maybe you go to a faith-free school, they are allowed free reign on what they're allowed to teach for sex education. So you might get nothing at all. So unfortunately, it's still a very unlevel playing field. I think on the whole, it has improved, but it is worrying that still a lot of children leave school without the I don't know, the just the basics of looking after themselves sexually. And we know, obviously, you know, as a parent, you must be concerned about it, that so many children today are getting their ideas about sex and relationships from online adult content.
Well, I guess mine probably pick up quite a lot from EastEnders and Netflix, you know. But look, thankfully for them, they've got Tom and I as parents, because we're quite an open, as I mentioned before, we're like an open book when it comes to any question they've got, and always have been, because we didn't have that as children ourselves. Have you seen like a resurgence in, and this is, by the way, about It's a Sin, because I was obsessed with It's a Sin.
I love that show, yeah.
Yeah, and I know that the point of it isn't necessarily HIV and the pandemic, rather it's more about homophobia, right? But have you seen like a resurgence in an interest and a conversation about HIV since It's a Sin, particularly like on Twitter and social media?
We've seen so many more people testing while the show was airing, but also younger people coming to understand what the 1980s AIDS crisis was like. I don't think people had quite realised just how many young gay men that it killed in the UK. You know, whole communities were wiped out, and I think that's such a alien concept to a lot of people. It's just, I think, coincidental, obviously, that it aired in a year of the pandemic, where we're having a different pandemic. But also, you can see how differently perhaps pandemics and epidemics are handled when it just affects gay men, or it affects everybody.
What HIV charities do you support?
So I am the trustee of Saving Lives UK, which is a UK-based HIV testing and awareness charity. And I work with LGBT Hero, which is an umbrella organisation which also has GMFA underneath it. And they are focused mainly on gay men's health. So it's, again, sexual health, HIV, mental health, and to also promote U=U and PrEP. Do you want me to explain what those are?
Tell us about U first.
Yeah, U=U. So that stands for undetectable equals untransmittable, which is a very complicated phrase, but just U=U. It means if a person living with HIV, like myself, is taking HIV treatment, and that treatment has suppressed the virus in my body, so the machines can't detect it, hence the name undetectable, it means we can't pass HIV on. So even if we have sex without a condom, you can't pass HIV on to your sexual partner. HIV positive parents who are undetectable can even have HIV negative healthy babies. So it's incredible. Just, you know, 1 or 2 pills a day, I take 1 a day, means you're healthy, you will live just as long as any of your friends and family. Yeah. And you can't pass on HIV to your sexual partners or your unborn children.
Do you know, I think there might be people my parents' generation, my parents' age, that will be really surprised to hear this, you know.
I know, I think we've only known it for the last 4 or 5 years. It's incredible news.
Yeah.
It's just getting it out there.
It is amazing.
So, pre-exposure prophylaxis, another really long phrase, or PrEP, is a single daily pill that people who are HIV negative, that don't have HIV, can take to prevent them from getting HIV. So think of it as like the contraceptive pill that women take, but for HIV. So it's just 1 pill once a day, and it is like 99% effective at preventing HIV transmission. So even if you have sex with someone that's HIV positive who isn't undetectable, you know, you won't get HIV. So just these 2 little sort of transformations in the last 4 or 5 years have really changed how I think we see HIV. It's no longer a scary death sentence and you're going to get it if you go with someone who's got HIV. Yeah. Also, you know, it changes how we talk about HIV, how we feel about HIV, and how people with HIV feel about themselves. So we no longer feel like we're some sort of threat to people. It's been incredible.
So yes, let's talk now about Tom Loves Cruising.
Yay.
Yay. And, you know, I've been reading your whole blog. It's really addictive. But, you know, because Tom and I had kids 7 or 8 years ago. We hadn't been on a cruise before that. And now since having kids, our holidays have completely changed. because we're basically desperate for something very self-contained when we go on holiday. So when we look for holidays, we look for a villa where we can sort of allow the kids to run around outside it and splash around while we sort of can lie there without caring the world, with a beer in our hands. So the idea of a cruise to us literally hasn't crossed our minds. And, so I definitely have questions for you. But first of all, tell everybody about your first cruise and then how you started your blog and what you're up to.
So my first cruise was in 2007 on a ship called Splendor of the Seas. I went with my ex-husband, and I wasn't sure what to expect either. I'd never been on a cruise. I hadn't really done much to do with the sea. And I was kind of half and half about it. But as soon as we got on board and I saw the scale of the ships and how spoilt you are when you're on board and how luxurious everything is and how you don't have to think about anything for an entire week, it instantly hooked me. And so most of our holidays since 2007, even with my new partner, have been cruises. So in the last couple of years, my work is HIV, sexual health, sort of discrimination. So it's a very serious topic to write about day in, day out. So, and I love writing. Yeah. So I decided to set up tomlovescruising.com just to write about something that was more enjoyable and lighthearted. So
I guess you are pretty clued up about the cruising industry, right? So can you see it all springing back this summer?
Oh, yes. So it's definitely going to come back in a big way. Just in the last couple of days, Princess Cruises, MSC, P&O Cruises and Viking Cruises have all announced they're going to run UK-only cruises this summer. So sailing from Southampton, just around the UK to the Channel Islands maybe, and then back to Southampton, so we don't have to go into different countries. And the demand for those is through the roof already. They don't think they're going to have enough space to supply demand on those cruises. And we also think that the cruises are probably going to be one of the safer holidays when it comes back, because the level of hygiene, the fact that you're going to need to be vaccinated to go on cruises, that people are tested regularly throughout the cruises, as are the staff. So I think it's going to be a safe way to holiday. And I think it's going to be so nice to just get out of the UK and, have some sunshine, some sea, some cocktails. I think one of the good things about the cruise holidays is for not just for couples or whatever, but for families as well, as the fact you get to go to a lot of places, but you only need to pack one kind of suitcase. You only need to unpack once when you go on the cruise ship. You find your cabin, which is your sanctuary. You put everything in the drawers. You set off from Southampton. You go to dinner, you have drinks, the kids go to daycare or whatever. And then you wake up in the morning, you're in France. You go and explore Paris or Brittany. You get back on the ship. You have dinner, you have drinks, you go and see a theatre show, you wake up, you're in Spain. And it's a really nice way to see a lot of places in a week. And then from those, we've spotted places that we've gone back for longer holidays after doing a taster day.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And so basically, I think our preconception of a cruise would be that it's quite crowded. This is coming from a position where we probably would go on a cruise as a family. But as I mentioned, we quite like that kind of idea that we're in our own little zone when we go away. And also we'd wonder whether it's too adult for kids. And we're hoping you can tell us otherwise.
So it's all about picking the right cruise line. They're so very different. So you've got Norwegian or NCL and Royal Caribbean on one hand, and they're meant for families. They're built for young people and families. The average age on board is probably no more than about 45. And, they're packed with water slides and fairgrounds and zip wires and bowling alleys, ice skating rinks, wave surfing simulators. But on the other hand, you've got Princess, Holland, America Line, and they're made for grown-ups. It's very afternoon tea and, posh furnishing and quiet times and libraries. So it's all about picking the right cruise line and the right itinerary as well. My parents went on their first cruise a couple of years ago, and they came back and they said they weren't sure it was for them because the people on board were too old for them. My parents are in their late 50s. Yeah. And they said the average age on board was way too high, but they chose the wrong cruise line. They chose a a older cruise line. They chose a 14-night itinerary. So that was a very expensive cruise. And by being a very expensive cruise, it kind of self-selects the people that can afford a expensive cruise, which tend to be, retirees. But if you pick a Royal Caribbean or an NCL cruise that's only a week long, it'll probably cost you about £700 per person. Kids usually go free or half price. You'll have fun. You can see lots of places. The daycare for children is amazing, so you can go and have cocktails.
Yeah, I mean, that is a big deal for us as well. Because
and you can choose family suites as well. They've got all these, it's like a big apartment on the cruise ship with slides for the kids in the apartment. So you've got your own space and your own balconies as well.
So any cruising plans with Jimmy then this year or over the next couple of years?
So, yes. Next month, April, we were supposed to be getting married on Norwegian Epic cruise ship in the Mediterranean. Obviously, due to the pandemic, that's been postponed. So that's now going to be April next year. But that'd be lovely. That's wedding at sea with about 20 of our friends and family.
Lovely.
This coming September, we've got a mini cruise from Southampton to Hamburg. That's only 2 nights, but that's a nice cheap one. And we're taking lots of friends with us. So it'll be a bit of a booze cruise. And October 2022, we've got a week-long cruise down the Croatian coast from Venice on a nice, pretty ship. So that's probably going to be our big holiday. Because the wedding, we're going to have all our friends and family with us. And it'll be fun, but it won't be a holiday. You're constantly wondering where they are and if they're happy and do people need something and the dramas. So I'm looking forward to our big holiday next October. Yeah, I might try and squeeze in a little cruise like May, June this year, but we'll see.
Maybe Tom and I and the boys might try like a sort of mini cruise to begin with to see how we get on and find foods. So
a lot of the cruise lines will do tasters from Southampton for 3 nights, around the £300 per person mark. And you can experience it'll do something like Southampton, Guernsey, France, Southampton, but it's a good way to see whether you like it, whether you like the feel of things.
I won't want to get off, I'll be like, no.
Well, it's like
do it on my own.
No matter where you are, you just wave and someone brings you a cocktail. You don't have to pay for it because you pay for the cocktail, all inclusive, everything up front. So you're just like, champagne, please.
Amazing. So anyway, let's move on.
Okay.
I like to talk to every one of my guests about kids, right? Because basically that's all I ever think about, because I am a full-on hands-on dad. That's my full-time job. So Tom and kids.
Okay.
Basically, I'd love to find out about your kind of experience, maybe as an uncle or a sort of honorary uncle to your friends' kids.
So my sister has got 2 kids, Toby and Lily, who are both in secondary school now. And my Jimmy's sister had a kid last year, so coming up to 1 year old.
Yeah.
So, and I love being an uncle. It's, I think being an uncle is kind of like responsibility-free parenting. You turn up, you bring all these expensive presents that they resent. You spoil them with sweets, and then at the end of the day, you hand the child back, and I'm going to go and have a drink now. That's my level of parenting.
That's what parents do after bedtime.
I love being an uncle. I love seeing them, spoiling them, and seeing how they're getting on. But that's about my level of parenting, I think. So do you think it's got easier for LGBT and especially T parents to adopt or foster children in recent years?
It is equally as easy for LGBT and plus T people to adopt and navigate the process, because basically the adoption agencies are there to treat everybody equally. So we all have exactly the same process to go through. But I do think LGBT people probably receive a slightly different line of questioning maybe when it comes to the assessment, just because our relationships and like previous life experiences are different. So for example, although the process was exactly the same, Tom and I were encouraged to talk about coming out and bullying and the kind of things that we experienced in our past, which not necessarily a straight person might have had. And I think the same for trans people. They're encouraged to apply for adoption because they make fantastic parents, and we know trans parents from the blogging community who are just wonderful. But I think that there might be some preconceptions in their minds that might prevent them from making that first step, you know, because they might feel like they're going to be treated differently, which they're not going to be.
But yeah, because I think that's the myth, isn't it, or the preconception that LGBT people have a harder time accessing a lot of things, especially adoption. Ofsted
won't allow adoption charities to treat LGBT people differently from straight people. You know, that is something in the past now.
And I think if anything, LGBT parents probably make better parents because, you know, we've been through so much. You know, we've been through the bullying at school, the coming out, you know, often rejection from friends and family, you know, building our own family and our own circle of friends and our own brand new life. So, you know, I think we've got a lot more skills to help adopted and fostered children and perhaps, you know, straight people do.
Yeah, I often say that. I like to throw that in, that LGBT people have experienced trauma. So in a way, we can kind of identify with what the kids are going through from quite an early stage.
Thank you for having me.
Let's remind everyone where to find you. So what's your Tom Loves Cruising website?
So yes, my cruising stuff you can find at tomlovescruising.com, and the Twitter and Insta for that is Cruising with Tom. And my HIV work, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook as @PositiveLad and www.beyondpositive.org.
This has been absolutely wonderful, Tom. Thank you so much for chatting to me.
No, thank you. Bye.
Bye.